a new learning thing for me.
So today we will be talking about the outplacement for the students here in our district. I have with me Deb Davis, who's the special ed out of district coordinator. One of the things that we want to make clear is that any decision to go into outplacement is decided by the IEP team. There is a pretty lengthy process that we would have a team go through prior to even making a decision or having a conversation of a student going outside of the Lewiston Public Schools. The first part is talking as a team and really looking at what they feel is in the best interest of the student. If they are thinking that they need more than what is being offered currently, and this doesn't mean that they're going out, but they're just saying, we need more, we need assistance. They would call the district office, and it could be myself, Anna, or our district clinical supervisor would go and do observations. At that time, we would give suggestions, strategies. We would do an observation of the student. We would meet with the teachers and provide a lot of feedback on how can we do things differently. At that time, we potentially would request additional testing for that student, and then come back as a team and say, okay, what can we do differently, and create potentially a plan for that student. And we ask the team to implement that plan. After all, and this could be months, it could be 6 months, it could be potentially a year, but we're always coming back to the table and talking about what's going on with that student. Let's look at the data. Let's make sure things are okay. If it's not working, what else do we need to do? So it really is a pretty lengthy process with the entire IEP team. That's the parents, the teachers, the administrators. We're all coming and having dialogue about that student. If we as a team say we feel that the student is needing something more than what Lewiston Public Schools can offer, then we start exploring what that possibility may be. Referrals then are made to those outplacement programs, and it's the special ed supervisors and the team that really look at where is that going to be. I take over the process at that time to make those referrals. We'll have an we'd have a placement meeting with the team that accepts them, and then at that point, Deb takes over as the coordinator. So then she now has the entire rest of the presentation.
So I got this email from Sean saying, we'd like you to come to the school board meeting. And I sent him an email back saying, great, what would you like me to say? He said, oh, they're going to ask you questions. I couldn't come completely unprepared. So I think of the questions that people ask me when I say, oh, I'm the outplace coordinator, because in the state of Maine, there are very few people who hold my position. And when I'm in workshops and things, and I say, well, I'm the Lewiston outplace coordinator for the day treatment kids. And then they say, what else do you do? And I say, well, gee, with about 110 kids on my caseload, what else do you think I should be doing? And they go, oh, because there are special ed directors in small towns that don't have as many kids on their caseload as Lewiston has in out-of-district placements.
And so at this time, current time, we're up to $3,883,000 dollars, not students, that we are spending in out-of-district for our students currently.
So I was hoping that as I anticipated, not knowing any of you really well, questions you might ask, and I certainly know that you have questions well above and beyond what I have tried to answer without you asking. Please take a few seconds to peruse what I've given you and see if that even begins to touch upon the information you might have wanted for today. And I will do whatever I can to elaborate, be more clear with you.
So when you go to make a recommendation or find placement, do you always find it? Is there always room someplace?
No.
And does the cost increase the further away you have to go? Does that have an impact? Or?
The transportation has an impact. So we have had students in Saco. We've had students who are at the Western Maine foothills. So those programs are going to cost us substantially more because of the transportation costs. However, the programs themselves don't have that. There are a lot of times, and I think currently we have 7, 8 that are still awaiting placement, that we've made referrals and they currently don't have a spot. So we either provide tutoring during that time, or we are still programming for those students within the schools, depending on the intensity of their presentation. But right now, there's a lack of availability throughout the state because of resources and human resources that they're unable to find staff to support the students.
So of that 3 million plus, what percentage of that is transportation, or do you?
None of that is transportation.
So that would be
That's
on,
just,
so transportation costs would be on another budget item under transportation, or is it still within your budget?
it's on my budget, but not in that budget.
Okay.
It's identified as special purpose transportation. It's on Butch's budget.
It's on Butch's budget? Okay, thank you. Any other questions?
I thought it might be helpful for, just talk a little bit about the transition from perhaps CDS to Lewiston Public Schools as it relates to out-of-district placements, and you know, do you know how many are in the pipeline? What that number is?
And so this year, this number.
Mr. Jensen?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It does mention here that some students return each year from outplacement, I guess would be the term. When that happens, is it more likely to be a progress on the student's part, or is it just better programming offered by LPS? What does it tend to be more? So of the students that go to outplacement programs, do you have any rough estimate of how many we could maybe bring back into the district, into district programs, if we maybe put a little bit more funding and increase some of the programming we have right now? I guess what I'm getting at is if we as a school board put more funding, more resources into these types of programs, how many students could we realistically bring back?
That we have in the district. And they're leaving because public schools are not largely designed to deal with kids with more severe impairments. We do a great job with the milieu. But when you get to the 1% or the 10% of the neediest kids, they provide challenges for the public school to deal with that look at staffing, that look at materials, that look at how we teach them, and that we don't have a therapeutic environment in every single school to deal with the 14 different handicapping conditions that kids might need. It's a very different program from teaching a child who's a violent, aggressive, very bright kid to a child who is 6 years old and is so severely intellectually impaired that learning to swallow, learning to roll over, learning to stand up have been his goals this year. And they've been very appropriate goals, but the public school isn't as well equipped to deal with that. It's an issue of space. It's an issue of culture and understanding the extent of the disabilities and how to bring them back and do them justice, whether it's socially, intellectually, emotionally. I can sit in an IEP meeting of an 18-year-old student and have a discussion about goals regarding the 18-year-old who's wearing a diaper and at the same time being taught to use an electric razor because he's shaving. That's not a totally off-the-board conversation to have in an IEP meeting for some of our more severely disabled kids. And are we equipped to deal with that? 18-year-olds who stay in school until they're 20 in diapers and shaving. Those are tough. And then there are some very aggressive kids that they are so severely disturbed. Are we equipped to deal with the number of adults it might take when they're having a disruptive incident and maintaining their privacy and their dignity because they can't control it? It's not by choice. Do we have the places in the building to secure them and not break all of the FERPA rules so that everybody in the world knows what's going on when they shouldn't? You know, it's staff training, it's having facilities, it's having a mindset that we are capable, able, and willing to deal with the most severely disabled kids this district has.
Ms. Hutchinson?
So I have two questions. While understanding the special ed laws to educate students in the least restrictive environments, are we really doing what is best for kids to bring them back into schools that are already bursting at the seams? And are we actually the best trained for meeting the more severe needs that these kids have without overtaxing the rest of our staff?
That at every IEP meeting, it's what skills does this child need to develop and what supports do we need to provide for this child to return and be successful. And I guess the operative word is success and safe and appropriate. And
And sometimes most appropriate is a special purpose
yep.
private school, and that's what we're going to continue to do.
Yep.
Every week we meet together
Mhm.
to look at every single student and talk about what is going on with that student. Do we feel that they are being met adequately at their current program, or do we need to look at something else? And if that something else is coming back to LPS, then we're meeting with the entire team and talking about, for them to come back, what do we need to put into place, and can we replicate what they need to put into place?
And there are a number of students whose needs exceed what most public schools can offer, and they are better served in the Therapeutic Day Treatment Center. We're fortunate to have relationships with some very high-quality programs.
So I get all that. But as the parent of a special needs child, sometimes being in the bigger school systems, such as Lewiston, is more detrimental than the outplacement, even though they have the right to be in public school. And our job is to look out for what's best for kids. Not just saving money, but what's best for kids. So there's a concern there with the number of students we have in district and the needs that these kids are coming. And for example, if one of the students is autistic and noise bothers them, then Lewiston Public Schools probably isn't the place that's going to be best for them to be successful in life. Just as a...
And I don't think we said anything about money. Money never makes a decision for our students, regardless of anything. It is truly about that student. And if we are saying that, if that's the presentation of the student and we know that it's going to be more damaging to that student to come to our school, that's going to be part of that conversation. If it's the student who says, I want to come back, which we've had a lot of those students who are saying, I'm coming back, I don't care what you say, we are coming back. So we're trying to figure out, okay, how do we get them back? If this is truly what they're wanting, then what goals do they need to achieve? What data are we going to collect? And then we look at that. But it really has to be driven by the entire picture. It's not just one thing. We're not going to say, because we think they're ready, we're talking to that student, we're talking to the families, we are talking to the team. Is this something that we can maintain? And there's a lot of times I'm like, there's no way. No, it's not a safe place for the student to come back right now. But we always have to come back to the table. If that family or that student is requesting it, we're going to have that meeting and we're going to talk about it and we're going to be very frank. Yes, we can support that student, or right now we might not be able to, but how are we going to get there? So it's a constant conversation.
Mr. Gagnon?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So thank you for being here, and thank you for all the work that you do. It's a tremendous amount of organizing paperwork and among staff as well as parents and community. So it's a lot of work, I understand. And I also understand that there's always going to be a need for outplacement because of the needs of the student and what we offer here at the school. Sometimes we might not have the right space for a classroom. Staff, just the arrangements in general, will always have to outplace just because of the way our community is. So basically, it's oftentimes best practice to send that student somewhere else. So I understand that. A few years ago, we did expand your program. Saved us quite a bit of money on average. About what I'm gathering, I know it's different for every student, but $30,000 for every student is quite a bit of savings. So it's nice to have that. From what I understand, we filled those seats very quickly, and there were more right behind that. So I understand that's going on as well. I feel personally, this is just an observation, that Lewiston Public Schools offers services that might not be available either in resources or in perspective as well, that other smaller communities might not have available. And so I feel like not just that, but as a community, when we have buses, we have a hospital, social services, and even more recently, even a playground for certain folks with special needs can go and enjoy. We are a welcoming community in that sense. So I see folks attracted to that. However, I'm just curious to hear from you. That's just an observation from me. Are there other reasons why folks might be moving to this region, to Lewiston, rather than stay in a smaller community, or maybe even a bigger community, possibly? I don't know. But that makes it attractive and fit, because I realize they also feel like they're part of a community in the classroom as well, because they're among others that have maybe similar situations as they have. Could you elaborate more on that?
That we're a great city to live in. I mean, we are a service community, and I know we discuss that a lot in this venue. So families are moving to town because of that. We do have a lot to offer in our public schools, as well as everything else that Lewiston has to offer. Our programs are some great programs, and I know they've been recognized throughout the country on some of the programs that we have, and we've been able to speak at different venues to talk about what we have been able to offer to our students. I'm not saying that's the only reason people come to Lewiston, but Lewiston is a great place to live. So I think it's all of that put together.
I also think, just to piggyback on that, this year's been an interesting phenomenon in the outplace world, because Lewiston, as a very transient community, has people coming and going. My job has been a revolving door of students dropping in out of who knows where, but at an equal rate, and this is the first time it's happened, I've had a one-to-one correspondence that for every student who moves away, and I think, okay, the numbers are down, within days, they're back. Someone's back. There's a replacement. Nature abhors a vacuum. And when one special ed student leaves, another one or two fills the spot of equal value.
And I think it's similar with our programs. Though we build these remarkable programs, but we fill them as quickly as we build them. and then we're at capacity, and then we're exploring alternatives, which is a special purpose private school. So it truly is in constant movement.
And I would add, you know, historically, service center communities have a higher special education budget. Any other questions, Mr. Jensen?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If a student, whether they had returned from a program or they hadn't been considered for one, if like a student caused a yellow lockdown, I'm not sure what we call it in the district, yellow, soft lockdown, whatever the term is, are they considered for outplacement? Is there any policy on that? No.
Could just add to that question. If a student is involved in a situation at school, the first question if it's referred to me for potential school committee action, first question is it a special ed student? If not, why not? And if it is, there needs to be a manifestation hearing, because if the action is a manifestation of the disability, then it's not appropriate to expel them or suspend them. We've got to do a better job on the programming.
Yeah, I guess just to clarify what I was saying, yeah, if it's a special education student, of course, it's going to be a manifestation hearing. If it's not, then I would hope that would come to us as a school board for disciplinary action. I guess just with the aim of cutting down on those soft lockdowns, if it was a student from a special education program, like what would the procedure be for the manifestation hearing? I guess just... Yeah, thank you for clarifying that. Sorry. Yeah, that's just what I was getting at. So I just, with the aim of cutting those down for all students, but I just wanted to know how the procedure was different for a student in a special education program. Asked and answered. Thank you.
Ms. Hutchinson?
One more question. What costs, if any, are reimbursable by main care or other insurances with our out-of-district placements for special ed students? What of the costs are covered by main care or other insurances?
The tuition is partially reimbursed. Any of the related services are partially reimbursed. And materials, like some special materials that the kids have, are bought. Like for all of my children who have sound speech generating devices, main care pays for those. And
The only issue would be if a student does not qualify for main care,
right.
and then that would be something that we are paying for, but it is all reimbursable.
Any other questions or comments from the committee? Anyone from the public wish to comment or ask a question? Back to the committee. Mr. Gagnon.
When you say reimbursable, we get reimbursed within 2 years. Is that what that is? Is that the same thing? Or is main care immediately?
Main care is slightly more immediate than that, but there still is the time lag. But for general special ed costs, there is a 2-year lag. That's correct.
Any other committee members? Any final words, Director Emery?
Our goal is always to bring our students back to the least restrictive environment, but the least restrictive environment is specific for those students, and it is our obligation to provide support for a student regardless of where they are. So we are very dedicated to our students in New Hampshire, in Massachusetts, Minnesota, wherever they may be. We continue to follow those students and make sure they're getting the services that they need.
All right, thank you both very much for the time that you put into this presentation. And we'll take a recess.